Esther chapter 7 and 8. Chapter 7 reads, So the king and Haman came to have dinner with Queen Esther. Esther bring about Haman's downfall. And on the second day, while they were drinking wine, the king asked Esther, What is your request, Queen Esther? It will be granted to you. And what would you like? Even if it is up to half of the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, your majesty, spare my life. That is my request, and spare the life of my people. That is what I ask for. You see, we, my people and I, have been sold so that we can be wiped out, killed, and destroyed. If our men and women had only been sold as slaves, I would have kept silent, because the enemy is not worth troubling you about, your majesty. Then King Xerxes interrupted Queen Esther and said, Who is this person? Where is the person who has dared to do this? Esther answered, Our vicious enemy is this wicked man, Haman. Then Haman became panic-stricken in the presence of the king and the queen. The king was furious as he got up from dinner and went into the palace garden, but Haman stayed to beg Queen Esther for his life, because he saw that the king had a terrible end in mind for him. When the king returned from the palace garden to the palace dining room, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was lying. The king thought, Is he even going to rape the queen while I'm in the palace? Then the king passed sentence on him, and servants covered Haman's face. Harbana, one of the eunuchs present with the king, said, What a coincidence. The 75-foot pole Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke up for the well-being of the king, is still standing at Haman's house. The king responded, Hang him on it. So servants hung Haman's dead head on the very pole he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king got over his raging anger. Chapter 8. On that same day, King Xerxes gave the property of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Also Mordecai came to the king, because Esther had told him how Mordecai was related to her. Then the king took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther put Mordecai's charge of Haman's property. Esther brings her request to the king. Esther spoke again to the king. She fell down at his feet crying and begged him to have mercy and to undo the evil plot of Haman, who was from Agag, and his conspiracy against the Jews. The king held out his golden scepter to Esther, and Esther got up and stood in front of the king. She said, Your Majesty, if it pleases you, and if I have found favor with you, if you consider my cause to be reasonable, and if I am pleasing to you, cancel the official orders concerning the plot of Haman, who was the son of Hammedatha, and was from Agag. He signed the order to destroy the Jews in all your provinces, your majesty. I cannot bear to see my people suffer such evil, and I simply cannot bear to see the destruction of my relatives. King Xerxes and Queen Esther and Mordecai the Jews, I have given Haman's property to Esther, and Haman's dead body was hung on the pole because he tried to kill the Jews. You write what you think is best for the Jews in the king's name. Seal it also with the king's signet ring, because whatever is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's signet ring cannot be canceled. Mordecai uses his position to save the Jews. And at that time, on the 23rd day of Sivan, the 3rd month, the king's scribes were summoned. What Mordecai had ordered was written to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and officers of the 127 provinces from India to Sudan. It was written to each province in its own script, to each people in their own language, and to the Jews in their own script and their own language. Mordecai wrote in King Xerxes' name and sealed the official documents with the king's signet ring. Then he sent them by messengers who rode special horses bred for speed. He wrote that the king had given permission for the Jews in every city to assemble, to defend themselves, to wipe out, to kill, and to destroy every armed force of the people and province that is hostile to them, even women and children, and to seize their goods. This was permitted on one day in all the provinces of King Xerxes on the 13th day of Adar, the 12th month. The copy of the document was made public in a decree to every province for all people. On that day, the Jews were to be ready to take revenge on their enemies. The messengers rode the king's fastest horses. They left quickly, in keeping with the king's command. The decree was issued also in the fortress of Susa. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king wearing the royal violet and white robe, a large gold crown, and a purple outer robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa cheered and rejoiced. So the Jews were cheerful, happy, joyful, and successful. In every province, in every city where the king's message and decree arrived, the Jews, they were happy and joyful, feasting and enjoying a holiday. Then many common people pretended to be Jews because they were terrified by the Jews.